Even if you're not a member of a union, you better thank unions. And what we know is we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work is good work. Because we know what we stand for. And that's a big part of this campaign. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. We know what we.
Today is Saturday, August the 17th, 2024. And for those of you who follow me for any length of time, there's Cece. She's back in the bed. She's very sometimey. Sometimes she wants to be cuddled up under me, and other times she doesn't want to be bothered, and she stays out of my room and is wandering some other place in the house for a month or two. But anyway, she's back. And today well, first of all, let me say that I'm still on my rant against boards of education. And I imagine I'm going to be on it for a little bit here as people are preparing for back to school and I'm seeing that kind of stuff show up on my feed. But so yesterday I posted this, and it was, one sort of a call to arms. Um for accountability. And it's almost as if in response to this assertion that I made that there should be someone who is checking up on, on me and my house and my neighbors' houses regularly to make sure that there's nothing um, going on that needs to be addressed and that our leaders need to be made aware of that I hadn't already made aware of myself. Some Jehovah Witnesses came by this morning, and without going into a lot of discussion that I had, Jermaine, and the jokes that we made about that, it brought me back to last year and then a brief period 2 years ago when I was researching Jehovah's Witness. And then after the UN Council meeting, United Nations Council meeting last year in September, I started researching this question about what the difference is between cops and the police. And this is sort of how I think. And so I wanted to share some journal entries that I did around this issue for two reasons. One, really the only benefit of having these journal entries is that I'm able to share them and show people that I've been thinking about these things for a really long time and trying to piece together this puzzle, because of course the people who are doing these things are not going to make it known, and they don't want it known. So, you have to be able to put the pieces together, to find the pieces and to think about them and to start asking questions, which lead to other questions that are more theories. And then based on the theories, I can look more deeply into, what it is I'm sort of speculating, because the reality is, the life that I live is a life of warfare. And so I want to be able to hold accountable the right people. I don't want to assume that everybody that I come across is aware of how what they do contributes to the problems that are going on in my home and therefore in other homes as well. So I wanted to open this discussion of what's the difference between cops and police, because those are common colloquialisms in our community. People use them interchangeably, but what I understand is that these are two separate forces who operate to enforce rules. And with that in mind, Jehovah Witnesses would be like the on the ground, we're going house to house to, to gather information and to check, to give that report to someone who's not on our team. Um, and I did this exercise, I believe this is from early 2022, where I was asking about the names of Jehovah, because there's so many and they're hard to remember, and they all, have a defined meaning. And so I started going through this and realized, I said, this is like are like phonetic messages. And so I made it a fun activity, and I even suggested that it would be a good activity to do with little kids who are just learning how to read and to sound out words, because they'll just say it how they see it. They won't, they don't have any preconceived notions that these words could mean something else. They'll just sound it out. And because they do that, you might be able to hear in it what the actual phrase is. And so that's sort of how I went through this activity and made it into a little puzzle. And, these are kind of the ways that I try to entertain myself as I'm doing things that are really revealing things that are disturbing ultimately, but at least I get closer to finding the answers, which is ultimately who is responsible. That is always what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the person, but then by the time I get to the person, I have such a long history of research and information that it makes it really hard for somebody to try to deny that they aren't responsible. And because I'm very careful and thorough in that way. So anyway, so if you'd like to do it, you can do it as well. But what I really sort of honed in on is the breaking down of the word Jehovah to include HOV, which is part of the Department of Transportation, and these extra lanes that they install on interstates that are, speedways for people who have a certain number. It's supposed to be high occupancy vehicle, but the thing about our current times is that there's no way that their original intention for these lanes is the reason why they keep constructing them. So there has to be another reason for these particular lanes. But not only that, how does the road system and the roadway system and our transportation system as a whole, which is inclusive not only of the road, the ground transportation on the ground, but also, via the water and via the air, and via the rail systems. So, this is how I think, because it's a much bigger issue than just my house. But I have to start in my house in order to be able to look objectively at what the problems are. And then I can kind of go out from there. And you have to start thinking this way for your own house. You don't have to do it for the entire city or for the entire world, but ultimately you'll start asking questions that might lead you to specific aspects of city functioning or state functioning or federal function or even international functioning that will make sense. And you should not dismiss it or brush it off because you feel like, I'm not that important. Yeah, you really are. Collectively, we are all that important. And the best example I can give for that is this current presidential campaign. No sane, rational person could possibly believe that the kinds of things that are being discussed in any presidential campaign, really, in recent years, but especially since Trump has been campaigning for president, would make sense for this. This is the kind of person you would want to lead your country in whatever way you understand that to mean. Some people don't really have a full understanding for what the job of the president is, which is oversight of our militaries. Any kind of enforcement agencies in some way, shape, or form will fall under the president, which is sort of why I outlined the post the way I did. So, somebody who says things like, grab women's crotches and, who has pending criminal charges and things like that, should be an automatic rule out. Like, it doesn't, when things don't make sense and it's that extreme, for me, it's like, there is something seriously wrong with this country, that there is something significantly wrong if people cannot rationally think about these kinds of things. And the same thing is true for Biden and Kamala, because they are nicer and gentler and, and seem to, talk about things in that people say that they want in ways that people can palate them better, doesn't make what they're doing any better. When I heard yesterday that they're investing all this effort on this prescription drug plans that won't be implemented until 2026. So it's almost like a dangling carrot. Like, we are going to work on this, but you have to vote for me first. And then, I'll spend the first year, working on trying to get your prescription costs low. Well, that's 2 years away as far as I'm concerned. That's if it's prescriptions, you're talking about people's medical needs and their health and their sense of quality of life physically, and you're saying that people have to wait 2 years. Like, why wouldn't you make that a priority to implement like today? And the same thing for groceries. Hunger is probably the number one way that the military will use to try to gain an advantage over any community that it is trying to overtake, because people, when they are hungry, become really desperate. So, when you talk about things like price gouging of groceries, that it should be a zero tolerance policy for that, because people need to eat and they need to eat every day, and they need to eat frequently every day. So if you're going to control how food is produced and distributed, then you have to have in place a system that ensures that people always have food. And the food that, that has to be like a priority. So the fact that people are so caught up in anything other than that, and then they're and voting and things like that, it just it really causes me to pause and say, what is wrong with people? Which is why I keep making these videos. I probably I'm inching towards 900 videos at this point, because I do one, or at least one, maybe two videos a day, and I've been doing this since February 2023, because I'm really trying to get through to people who just are out of their minds. That's really the only explanation that you could have for what people are even having conversations about at this point. Like, why are we even talking about this? He's not qualified. They're not qualified. We need people who can do this, thus, and so. But of course, it starts at the local level, which is why I put the post together in the way that I did, because accountability is important. I don't think these people would want these jobs if they were held accountable to the function of the role as intended. If they accepted that level of responsibility, we'd be having a different kinds of conversation. But they don't. They are in these positions, and they're using them to manipulate the public via putting themselves above the law. They believe they're above the law, and that because they make the laws, that they can make laws that will allow them to do things that are not helpful to any of us, including themselves, and get away with it. And you cannot get away with it. So what I want to do is share with you the journal entries that I had about Jehovah's Witnesses, because what sort of occurred to me as I was pulling this together is religions that keep the Sabbath as Saturday, because there's religion, it's all the same. It's all a lie. It's not natural. People who believe and passionately believe, I have to know in my heart, are attracted to it because of the aspects of the teachings that talk about love and community and family and working together, which we all should hold on to. But to attribute the work that's necessary to ensure that that comes about again, and that we are able to maintain it, cannot be reliant on some force outside of each individual person in their individual homes and in their individual families. You have to be able to be self-accountable, and or then to be held accountable when you step outside of boundaries that impact the lives of the people who are around you. That just has to be the case. If you can't say, well, I'm gonna wait for God to come down from heaven somewhere and just wipe everybody out. You doing a good job of that all by yourself. You would, people say Jesus is coming or Jesus already came. It don't matter. What's your life like today? So if you're waiting, how much worse does it have to get, kind of thing. So but I want to share these entries specifically about Jehovah's Witness, because that's the research I did. I haven't done a lot of research on the COPS, the COPTS, but I had started to do that after the United Nations meeting last year, because of all the time that was being spent on the Security Council because of what's going on in Israel. So let me go ahead and get started and pull that together for you, and hopefully we can end with a better idea of how our enforcement systems are working or not working, and who is accountable for these enforcement systems, both the public enforcement systems like the military and the police, and then the militia, which are the people who operate in darkness, who are dressed as civilians and live as civilians, but had a capacity to wreak all kinds of havoc on your home and your family. I want to start with this information that I researched while watching the UN conference in 2023 on the Annan Plan. And I'm not going to get into explaining all the details of it, because people don't aren't interested in the complexities of it anyway, but you have the information here if you'd like to do more research on your own. The point that I wanted to make in sharing it is that this is separate but equal doctrine, and that is a huge aspect of the strategy, is that you have two people who normally would be getting along, and then you insert yourself as a third party and create separation between those two groups, and then you don't let them talk to each other. But you sell them both on the idea that they'll both be treated equally, and then the deal is made. And that's sort of the direction that things have gone in for centuries, really. But it's especially documented in the last 100 years, decade by decade. So I wanted to start with that. And that's sort of how I came to want to know more about the Copts. I want to remind you that when I'm talking about the Ish, I'm talking about the United Kingdom and Britain as a culture, not as a specific group of people, because you cannot determine anything based on race or on genetic appearance. You have to understand the culture of the British and their strategy of colonizing for centuries. What's important for you to understand as you look at this entry, which I took from the Encyclopedia Britannica website, which was developed by the Britons, is that when they invaded and began what would become the Coptic religion, there were Muslims there. And Muslims, the religion of Islam is newer than Christianity. It came after. So this means this was a group who had been colonized and then converted into Muslims. And then those Muslims now they want to convert into Christianity, which creates the division. I think it's also important for you to understand that the key people in this are Romans. You have Roman Catholics, you have Greek speaking Romans. And I've explained to you before that Romans are homosexual. They are gay. And again, in 2024, it's important for you to evaluate each individual person on their character and their own merits, and not try to generalize and group people rather than look at who they are and what they are doing, because you can't hold people accountable in a group like that. You can find a group of people who need to be held accountable individually, but by forcing people into a labeled group, it makes it harder to whittle it down to who specifically you need to target. And you have to keep in mind that militaries infiltrate communities, and so they insert themselves into groups that already exist and start to corrupt it. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that the Council of Nicaea would take these scrolls or these journals, which is essentially what they are, and decide which journals they wanted to use in order to convert the locals into their religion. So they would read and study and research and understand what their belief systems are, and then start to shape their writing so that it matched Christianity in the way that it's written. And that's why there are so many variations of Christianity and so many editions of the Bible and other religious texts. This is an entry that I rewrote in September of 2023 that I had originally written in a journal from April of 2021, but I wanted to organize it better and really just to make it neater, because I was kind of rambling around when I was in my theory phase at that point. But I'm sharing this because what is important for you to see is that the Allied Command Operations, which is also has the NATO military command structure under it, announced in 2018 that they were going to headquarter Joint Force Command in Norfolk, Virginia. That's important in the full context of everything that has happened since that time. I also posted a couple of days ago a question about the Global South. And this entry that I did in 2021, I was researching human development indexes and how that played out especially for third countries considered third world. But they have since stopped calling it third world. Now they call it underdeveloped countries and things like that. You know, they always changing the names. The importance of this is in how countries that are not part of NATO, via the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, do not receive aid. And these are the countries where people are hungry, where they live in deserted conditions, as a result of their unwillingness to partner with this militarized group. The last entry I wanted to share with you is from March of 2023, when I received a call from an elder from the Kingdom Hall, which is one of the 4 churches that are based inside the Ingleside neighborhood. There are 4 churches just inside this neighborhood, which is completely enclosed. There's only one way in and one way out. And I thought I had this banter with him at that time because of everything else that was going on and that I was researching. But he called to invite me to a memorial service for Jesus at the Doubletree Hotel. And so I recorded here the conversation that I had with him. One, because I just wanted to have it noted in the date. But also because of the additional things that I started to consider after our conversation, and then I started to research it. So the point I'm making is that it seems clear to me that beginning in 2018, when joint forces would begin to set up here and headquarter here, which is international, that's an international organization, that the process began of setting up cops all over the city of Norfolk and completely surrounding it in every way, religion, in terms of politics and policy, in terms of our actual enforcement officers and the military here in Norfolk. And I hope this takes some of the fake woo-woo, fake supernatural aspects of the God some people trust out of the equation, because the focus is on this God, on all of the monetary pieces that you use to acquire things that nature makes available for free. But I will say that the spring of 2023, right around Easter time, absolute hell was unleashed in my home. And I believe everything that they had set up until that point, they turned it all on and they left it on 24 hours a day. And it has just been a fighting battle every day since that time. Some of the things have improved, which is helpful because I know that means that there are people who have the capacity to be able to turn it off or control it, who are working with me and our team, but it still exists. And, you know, if I'm still suffering from any aspect of it, it means other people are also still suffering from the use of it. And the only way that we'll be able to deal with this is if you're able to, for example, take this information that I'm sharing today, and it opens the way for you to look more closely at organizations you maybe had not considered before, and to identify specific people who can be held accountable for what is going on, for the decisions that have been made, because there is a top of the chain and there's a bottom of the chain. And if we start at the top, it'll trickle all the way down to whoever it needs to trickle down to. Keep in mind that it is the operations of the military and militia to infiltrate communities and to assimilate into them in ways that they begin to corrupt systems that were working and were healthy and helpful for people in ways that they then are no longer helpful. So again, that's why you have to evaluate each person on their individual merits, their motivations, and what you can observe consistently. Because the other thing about these folks is that they are very inconsistent because they forget what lies they told. It's hard to keep track of all of that stuff. So it should be a lot easier to be able to tease out who the guilty parties are from the victims of that type of assimilation. And listen, Kamala said it better than I could.
Hard work is good work because we know what we stand for. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. You know, when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. We know what we